Mr. Trump really appreciated the family ties or friends ties. He tends to think personal ties could be extended to interstate relations. I think sometimes people is very critical of such kind of things. But anyway, that's a very good starting point for the two major countries, especially, one of the strong allies in the world.
This is SPF Worldviews, and that was our guest, Tsuneo Nabe Watanabe, Senior Fellow of the National Security and Japan-U.S. program at SPF. Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, just 1 week after taking office, has faced her first major diplomatic test, a summit meeting in Japan with U.S. President Donald Trump during his closely watched Asia tour. In this episode, Nabe-san breaks down the outcomes of their meeting and discusses the economic and security implications for the Japan-U.S. relationship. Nabe-san, welcome back to SPF Worldviews.
Thank you very much for asking me to comment. Happy to talk.
Leading up to Trump's visit to Japan, I think there was a great deal of focus on how the newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi would handle this test of her diplomatic skills. What were your first impressions of this meeting?
First impression is that I'm so relieved to their chemistry was really tested and successfully done. Because many people predict the chemistry between Trump and Takaichi would be good. But people never know, even such kind of predictions sometimes are very wrong. For example, chemistry between former Prime Minister Ishiba and Mr. Trump was bad. That's a prediction. But their chemistry was good. So I'm glad that Ms. Takaichi and Mr. Trump's chemistry was so good.
And I think one of the major connection points that they had and that was really emphasized in this meeting was the connection with the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who they both had close relationships with. How did you see that playing into this meeting?
That's very important because Mr. Trump really appreciated the family ties or friends ties. And he tended to think the personal ties could be extended to the interstate relations. I think sometimes people is very critical of such kind of things. But anyway, that's a very good starting point for the two major countries, especially, the one of the strong allies in the world.
Both sides were very welcoming in their approach. I think even outside of Akasaka Palace, there was a Ford F-150 pickup truck to welcome Donald Trump. And there were comments or reports afterwards that Prime Minister Takaichi said she would nominate President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. And there seemed to be just overflowing welcoming on the Japan side. What did you think of this approach? Was this a good strategy, or how did you see that playing out?
Yes. I think probably I could say that it's an Asian tradition to welcome the partner. I think China is also very good master of welcoming the counterpart. Mr. Trump was very welcomed in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia too. And South Korean President Lee also welcomed Mr. Trump. So it's kind of a tradition, but it's reflection of a seriousness of a Japanese the leader and the people to maintain the closer alliance with the United States because we need to survive in a very difficult security environment. And also, we have a little bit difficult economic relation with the United States imposed by the higher tariff. And somehow we need to have agreement with the United States for the reasonable tariff level to survive in Japan's export industry.
President Trump is a bit more of a known entity for his policy, whereas Prime Minister Takaichi has just assumed office. And so a lot of her policies are not known, or we don't have a good picture of where she might be headed. I wonder if you could talk about where you see alignment in the general positions and policies between the two leaders.
Ms. Takaichi was just elected, and surprisingly, she's popular among people. Her approval rate is more than 70%. That's much higher than her predecessors. So I think that's a very good political capital for her to proceed her own policies, especially security and foreign policy. I'm sure that Takaichi showed the Japanese public diplomatic ability and also the creating a good chemistry with the U.S. leader. I think that impressed the Japanese people. Japanese people knew, of course, that probably Ms. Takaichi and Mr. Trump, the chemistry was good because Ms. Takaichi was a protege to the former Prime Minister Abe, who Trump really liked it. I think Mr. Trump is really depends on the personal relations and chemistry with the counterpart. Very good to start. That's clear. Nobody can deny.
On a personal level, they've really hit it off and been able to establish this good first relationship. Do you see any potential areas for friction or areas of disagreement that may come up either on the policy side or otherwise?
First of all, many media and the people are worried about existing agreement between Japan and the United States for the $550 billion investment from Japan to U.S. And somehow U.S. has a huge control over contents. And the contents are not so clear yet. And still the interpretation of investment are very different from U.S. side and the Japanese side. And this time, probably the detail of agreement was not discussed. I don't think they have a time, such kind of things. That's one thing. And the other one is Ms. Takaichi promised to the increasing defense budget much earlier than former Prime Minister Kishida agreed to. But how Ms. Takaichi secured the budget from that national diet? She's still suffering from a minority in both houses. So that is a really big test. So good starting, but a good starting do not guarantee happy end.
You brought up the $550 billion US dollar agreement for investment, and this was one of two agreements that the two leaders signed during this visit. So one was this tariff-related agreement where Tokyo agreed to invest $550 billion in the United States. And then the other one was a framework to secure the mining and processing of rare earths and other minerals. What is the significance of these agreements being signed at this meeting? Are they mainly for optics, or is there something more substantial that happened here?
It seems to me that's more for the larger international politics, because Mr. Trump is now in South Korea, and to have a bilateral summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. I think clearly China is utilizing rare earth and rare mineral somehow for the negotiating with a tariff negotiation. I think the rare earth, especially the securing a supply chain, is critical for all countries of the region in the world too. And U.S., Japan clearly has the interest to have agreement to secure supply chain. And I think that is a really good step to somehow President Trump is starting to discuss with counterpart Xi Jinping.
Tariffs have been a big tool in the tool belt of Donald Trump when looking toward international relations and diplomacy. I wonder, does the signing of this agreement in any way quell fears on the Japan side regarding any potential instability in this trade relationship?
Basically, imposing a tariff is not so good for the economy, both Japanese economy and U.S. economy. But at the same time, clearly it gave Mr. Trump somehow the bargaining tips to go ahead for the several issues. For example, in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Mr. Trump was somehow welcomed by the achievement of a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia. And several media said one major part is coming from Mr. Trump's effort. Effort is actually the threatening to impose a tariff. If you don't agree, we're going to put more tariff. It may have worked out somehow. But generally, the imposing a tariff is not good for the regional economy and the U.S. economy either. So that's probably the still how important that kind of issue is, especially for East Asian leaders are so worried about U.S. engagement in the region, militarily or economically.
So what then are the next steps for Japan looking toward this economic relationship with the United States?
Probably Japan is the first country which has been a tough trade negotiation with the United States in 70s, 80s, 90s. So Japan know how the sentiment of U.S. voters, especially suffering from losing a job, and really wanted to get back their job and production to their country. So I think that's why the Japan never confronted the U.S. Trade negotiation and tried to find the best way to somehow the agreement in a tariff or economic situation without sacrificing the value of a military alliance between the U.S. and Japan. That should be expanded to the other regional players too. I think that's very important for the U.S. to win over the competition with China too.
Looking to the defense issue and security issue, you mentioned in one of your previous comments, Prime Minister Takaichi has previously pledged to raise Japan's defense spending to 2% of GDP by the end of March, which is well ahead of the previously planned schedule. Leading up to this initial meeting between the leaders, I think there were some concerns that perhaps the U.S. would come in or Donald Trump would come in and push for more or really try to push forward a specific number. How did you see this play out in the meeting between the two leaders?
That's lessons learned by the Japanese leader, Takaichi. If Japan is just waiting for the response from U.S., I'm sure it's a time for the U.S. Asking Japan, you should spend more money on defense, considering the wild environment. Instead, Takaichi really tried to step up to the more rapid level of attainment of Japan's defense spending. That's somehow the very good way to prevent further demand from the U.S. side. Because several U.S. defense officials are suggesting Japan should pay more than 3% of GDP for the defense. And already NATO country agreed to pay the 3.5 for the defense by the year 2035. So I think the Prime Minister Takaichi is wise enough to the more positive forward-leaning the offer by herself. But still, Japan have a homework to spend more than that. And my sense is that the GDP number doesn't matter so much, but Japan really need to realize the very effective and efficient defense capability. That's building up is a really big test for the Ms. Takaichi.
From Tokyo, they had their summit meeting, and then the two leaders flew together in the U.S. presidential helicopter Marine One to Yokosuka, where they gave a speech aboard the aircraft carrier, the USS George Washington. And in those remarks, Prime Minister Takaichi had mentioned that Japan is facing a severe, unprecedented security environment. And she talked about how Japan needs not just words, but action to reinforce their defense capabilities and contribute to peace and security. What are your thoughts on these comments? Do they maybe signal any particular defense policy for the Takaichi administration?
Ms. Takaichi is regarded as a conservative lady. How conservative is really depends on the policy direction. I think I'm a very positive for the Ms. Takaichi's stance for the more positive security policy. And this government formation changed from a previous Ishiba administration to Takaichi administration. Ishiba had a coalition with a Komeito party. As coalition party, more pacifist tendency. Current coalition partner is Ishin party. That's more conservative than Komeito. Clearly, there's some agreement for the more positive defense policy. Ms. Takaichi picked up good security policy defense advisor from retired self-defense forces. She has been very positive to show the more positive cyber defense when she was in charge of Minister of Telecommunication. People expect Takaichi to be the more security-oriented person. And somehow Ms. Takaichi enjoyed a high approval rate, more than 70%. That's clearly Japanese people know Takaichi is more hawkish and more seriously about security. That was a good point to the Japanese people, especially the younger generation, because they are worried about their own security issue in such a very difficult security environment.
And what will you be watching in the Takaichi administration regarding defense policy moving forward?
One impressive of Ms. Takaichi's policy offer in LDP leaders election. She's offering to the more function of Japan's intelligence capability. And even she offered counterintelligence legislation. That was very unpopular among liberals. But it's necessary. And the reason is simply that Japan didn't have a normal level of counterintelligence capability. And of course, intelligence capability too. I think the Takaichi seems to the tackle of overdue homework of Japan's security policy. Without intelligence capability, no nation can have a reasonable and effective security policy. So she just stepped up to such kind of the taboo area in the past.
What will you be watching moving forward, looking to the Japan-U.S. relationship writ large and its impact on the region?
Japan and the United States has been upgrading the function of a military alliance. But that was never tested in serious combat situation. That was lucky, of course. And clearly the capability is creating deterrence capability and prevent future warfare. But, the military balance is keep changing. So it's time for both leaders to renew the function and the capability of the alliance. And that's going to be clearly the source for the future stability of the region.
That was our conversation with Tsuneo Nabe Watanabe, Senior Fellow of the National Security and Japan-U.S. Program at SPF. Thanks for joining us for this episode of SPF Worldviews. We'll see you next time.